Phoebe Bishop was the kind of teenager most parents dreamed of raising. She was quiet, respectful, and intelligent, always on time, and never gave her parents a reason to worry. At 17, she had her future mapped out. She wanted to go to art school and eventually work as a children's book illustrator. Her paintings often featured soft, dreamlike landscapes and delicate figures, and her room was filled with canvases and sketchbooks stacked neatly against the walls. She lived with her parents in a modest two-story house in a quiet cul-de-sac in Elmridge, a town where everyone knew everyone and nothing bad ever seemed to happen. On the afternoon of May 14th, Phoebe left her part-time job at the local bookstore around 4:30 p.m. Her manager said she had clocked out early, saying she had to finish some schoolwork. Security cameras showed her walking down Main Street, wearing her backpack and holding her phone. It was a bright, sunny day, and she took her usual route home, cutting through a small park just a few blocks from her house. But somewhere between the bookstore and her front door, Phoebe disappeared. Her parents began to worry when she didn't come home by dinner. It was unlike her to be late without texting. By nightfall, her phone was going straight to voicemail. Her father drove around the neighborhood while her mother called friends, teachers, and the police. By 10 p.m., a missing persons report had been filed. Elmridge was shaken. In a town where the most serious crime in years had been a stolen bicycle, the thought of a teenage girl vanishing into thin air didn't make sense. Volunteers gathered at the town hall early the next morning. Search teams fanned out across the neighborhoods, wooded areas, and the nearby river. Drones scanned the forests, and dogs were brought in to sniff out her trail. Local news channels aired her photo: long brown hair, green eyes, and a small, tired smile. Her friends and classmates passed out flyers. Her family made emotional pleas on camera, begging for her safe return. But hours turned into days, and there were no signs of her. It was as if she had simply vanished. 3 days later, a jogger in the wooded trail behind Ridgeway High School noticed something strange near a patch of tall weeds. A backpack, partially covered in leaves, caught his attention. As he moved closer, he saw what looked like a shoe, then a hand. He called the police immediately. When authorities arrived, they confirmed the worst. It was Phoebe. She had been left face down in the dirt, her arms tied behind her back with shoelaces. Her clothes were soaked and torn, and there was a deep wound on the side of her head. The coroner later estimated that she had died the same day she went missing. She had suffered blunt force trauma, and there were signs she had struggled. The investigation was now a murder case. Shock and grief swept through Elmridge. The image of the quiet, gifted girl who once painted sunsets and whispered through crowded classrooms was now burned into the town's collective memory, not as a student, not as a daughter, but as a victim. As investigators dug deeper into Phoebe Bishop's life, the image of a perfect, uncomplicated teenager began to shift. At first glance, her world had appeared spotless: school, work, family. But small cracks began to show. Her phone, found near the scene of the crime, offered the first glimpse into a side of her that no one had seen before. It was damaged but reparable, and after days of careful data recovery, a series of encrypted messages surfaced. They came from a contact with no saved name, just a string of numbers. The texts began about 6 weeks before her death. Most were vague: questions about meeting locations, cryptic references to secrets, and a sense of tension that built up over time. The last message was sent the day she disappeared. It simply said, "Today." Her parents were stunned. They had no idea Phoebe had been speaking to anyone secretly. Her friends weren't much help either. At school, her best friend Zoe confessed that they hadn't been close lately. According to her, Phoebe had changed in the past month. She stopped showing up to art club, skipped lunches, and spent more time alone. Zoe assumed it was stress from upcoming exams, but now it seemed like something else had been going on. The most alarming revelation came when investigators looked at her recent movements. Surveillance footage from around Elmridge showed Phoebe frequently walking the outskirts of town late at night. On 3 separate occasions, she had been seen near the abandoned Ridgeway storage lots, an area popular with local teens but also known for its sketchy reputation. She had told her parents she was going to the library. They never questioned it. The name Damon Clay came up quickly. He had once attended Ridgeway High but had been expelled the year before for fighting. With a history of aggression, a reputation for substance use, and a long disciplinary record, Damon was already known to law enforcement. When questioned, he claimed he barely knew Phoebe. But digital records told a different story. Their social media accounts showed they had exchanged messages months earlier. They had once hung out in a group, and there were blurry photos of them sitting together at a bonfire last fall. Things took another turn when a neighbor reported seeing a dark car outside the Bishop residence around the time Phoebe disappeared. The vehicle matched the description of Damon's old sedan, which had since been sold. Police searched his home and found a few of Phoebe's art supplies in a duffel bag: 2 markers, a paintbrush, and a small canvas with half-finished flowers. He claimed she had given them to him months ago. He was brought in for further questioning, but without hard evidence, they couldn't charge him. Then came the break-in. Just over a week after her funeral, someone entered the Bishop house through the back door while her parents were out. Nothing was taken, except her sketchbook. The one Phoebe carried everywhere, filled with her personal drawings, journal entries, and observations. It wasn't just a book. It was a window into her thoughts. And now it was gone. 2 weeks after the break-in, the missing sketchbook turned up in an unexpected place. A maintenance worker cleaning a storm drain behind Ridgeway High School noticed a soggy pile of paper jammed between the grate and the concrete. The cover was torn and water-damaged, but faint pencil marks were still visible. It was Phoebe Bishop's sketchbook. Forensics handled it carefully, drying the pages and recovering what they could. Some of the drawings were smudged or ruined, but a few remained intact, and what they revealed changed the course of the investigation. The early pages were typical of Phoebe's work: portraits of classmates, animals, dreamlike forest scenes. But as the pages progressed, the content became darker. One page showed a figure standing alone in a doorway, surrounded by shadows. Another featured eyes, dozens of them, staring from behind trees. A few were detailed sketches of places around town: the bookstore, the high school, the park trail where she was last seen. Then, toward the end, came a chilling image: the partial face of a man, half covered by a mask, standing in front of a crooked house with a leaning fence and broken windows. Detectives immediately began searching for the house. After comparing the sketch to property records and old photos, they identified it. The house sat on the far edge of Elmridge, just outside the town's abandoned industrial zone. It had once belonged to Carl Finch, a former janitor at Ridgeway High School who had been fired under suspicious circumstances 5 years earlier. He had faced accusations of inappropriate conduct with students but had disappeared before any legal action could be taken. Since then, the house had remained vacant, or so everyone thought. When police entered the home, what they found confirmed their worst fears. The interior was in shambles: walls crumbling, furniture covered in dust, floors warped from years of neglect. But the basement told a different story. There were signs of recent activity. A mattress lay on the floor, surrounded by empty food containers, blankets, and candles. Against one wall was a corkboard covered in newspaper clippings, stories about Phoebe's disappearance and death. There were printed photos of her walking to school, sitting on a bench, looking out her bedroom window. Some had red circles drawn around her face. In a plastic storage bin nearby, detectives found several personal items: a pair of sunglasses, an old bracelet, and the missing phone charger from Phoebe's room. But the most important discovery was a set of fingerprints on the basement window frame and across several of the plastic bins. When tested, they didn't belong to Carl Finch. They belonged to Damon Clay. This revelation shifted the focus of the case dramatically. Damon had denied ever going to that house. He claimed he had no connection to Finch. And yet, there was his fingerprint, clear as day, inside the very basement where someone had been stalking Phoebe. Detectives were left to untangle the timeline. Had Damon been there with her? Was he helping Carl? Or was he just another pawn in a larger, more sinister plan? Faced with mounting evidence, police brought Damon Clay in for a second round of questioning. This time, he didn't try to deny knowing about the house. His demeanor changed, and under pressure, he finally admitted that he had followed Phoebe on the day she disappeared. According to him, she had asked to meet someone there, someone she had been communicating with for weeks. Damon claimed he had grown suspicious, even jealous, and followed her without her knowledge. He said he watched her enter the abandoned house but never went inside. He waited outside for about 15 minutes, then left when she didn't come back out. He insisted he had nothing to do with her death. His story was riddled with inconsistencies. Investigators didn't believe he had simply walked away. They found his fingerprints inside the house, not just outside. More than one set, on multiple surfaces. Yet none of his prints were found on the disturbing items in the basement: the photos, the corkboard, the mattress. Those appeared to belong to someone else entirely. Forensics confirmed that some of the prints, including those on the camera lens used to photograph Phoebe, matched the long-missing Carl Finch. This raised an unsettling question. Had Damon and Finch crossed paths? Or had Damon unknowingly walked into a trap set by a predator hiding in the shadows? Investigators began piecing together a timeline. It appeared Phoebe had been investigating someone. Her phone history revealed deep searches about Carl Finch, articles about his dismissal, and even an old social media account that belonged to him under a different name. She had bookmarked pages, saved screenshots, and taken handwritten notes in a journal that was recovered from her desk. It seemed that she had uncovered his history and suspected he was still in Elmridge, operating under a new identity. The anonymous texts on her phone were re-examined. They hadn't come from Carl Finch. They had come from a disposable number linked to a burner phone, one that was later found in Damon's old car. The texts, full of vague warnings and shifting plans, had likely been sent by Damon himself. Investigators now believed he had discovered Phoebe's secret efforts to track Finch and had inserted himself into the situation, hoping to manipulate or control her actions. Even so, there was no proof that Damon had killed her. There were no signs of a struggle involving him, and his DNA wasn't found on her body. The wounds she sustained didn't match any of the weapons or objects found in his possession. Instead, a small trace of skin was recovered from under her fingernails, likely scraped during the final moments of her life. When tested, it matched a man with a long record, hiding under multiple aliases. Carl Finch. It was no longer just a case of a jealous teenager stalking a girl. This was something darker. Phoebe had stepped into a dangerous game, trying to expose someone far more experienced at hiding. Damon's lies had delayed the truth, but the evidence now pointed to a predator who had returned from the past, unnoticed by everyone but the one girl brave enough to look. The manhunt for Carl Finch spread beyond Elmridge within hours of confirming the DNA match. With evidence now proving he had not only returned but also murdered Phoebe Bishop, authorities alerted law enforcement agencies across 3 states. His photograph, aged through forensic software to reflect 5 years of aging, was released to the public. Tips began to pour in, some useful, others not. But it was a gas station clerk in rural West Haven, nearly 200 miles away, who finally led police to him. The clerk recognized the photo and told police that a man matching the description had been paying in cash and living in a cabin near the woods. When officers raided the cabin, they found Carl Finch alone, packing a small bag. He didn't resist arrest. Inside the cabin were dozens of disturbing items. Drawers full of photos, most taken from a distance, showed teenage girls across different towns, many of whom had never known they were being watched. Diaries, locks of hair, jewelry, and school ID cards were all carefully labeled and stored. Among the collection was Phoebe's missing locket, which her mother had given her on her 16th birthday. But most unsettling was the journal. Written in small, controlled handwriting, it detailed his actions over the years. Finch had been living off the grid, drifting from town to town, changing his name, taking odd jobs, and watching girls who reminded him of someone from his past. In the entries about Phoebe, his words were obsessive. He called her clever, curious, and a threat. He claimed she had discovered him and was getting too close. He wrote that she had started showing up near the abandoned house, watching him just as he had watched her. One particular entry stood out. Finch wrote that he didn't choose Phoebe randomly, she chose him. She had sent messages, left drawings near the house, and walked by more often than chance would explain. He believed she was trying to lure him out. He described a final meeting. According to his account, Phoebe confronted him, told him she knew who he was, and threatened to report him. What happened next, he wrote, wasn't planned. He claimed he panicked. The details were vague, but the implication was clear. She had frightened him by knowing too much, and he killed her to silence her. Back in Elmridge, the truth was slowly pieced together. Phoebe hadn't been a passive victim. She had figured out who Carl Finch was and tried to expose him on her own. The sketchbook, the photos, the hidden research, she had done what no one else had. The tragedy was that she had done it alone. Her case forced a re-evaluation of how cold cases and missing person reports were handled. Investigators reopened unsolved disappearances in other towns where Finch had lived. In the end, Phoebe's courage led to the discovery of a serial predator hiding in plain sight. Though she didn't live to see justice served, her actions saved lives. Elmridge now remembers her not only as the girl who was taken too soon but as the one who fought back.